Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to HaRav Gottlieb's articles. We're in article number 5 in the back of Matan Torah, or the English translation, Giving. This one is called Levels of Self-Love. Just give me a moment to pull up the live stream in case anyone tunes in, has any comments, questions, or concerns. Alrighty. Page 155 in Giving. A baby that is born, as soon as it comes out of its mother's womb, wants only to get pleasure. People are born as animals, as the verse in Job or Eov states, quote, a person is born a wild donkey, from Eov or Job 11:2. After birth, we continue to be drawn toward the lowest levels of degradation due to the enormous self-love that is imprinted within us. As Bala Sulam writes, quote, all our movements are compelled to pivot around this self-regard, the regard for the self, the egoistic love. Important to note in regards to the notion of being born like a wild young donkey. A donkey is chamor. Chamor is the same letters and therefore is related to the notion of chomer. Chomer is a raw material. And the chomer of reality, the raw material that makes up all of creation, is the will to receive. Because the will to receive is the novelty, as it did not exist and does not exist within the Creator. The Creator is perfect and has no lack, and therefore has no will to receive, because the will to receive connotes a lack. Therefore, all of creation, that which is outside of the Creator, so to speak, is nothing but different variations and levels and manifestations of the will to receive. So being born like a wild donkey is also saying we're born with this raw material, this chomer, the chomer being our egoism. At the same time, it's also the letters chamor and chomer being rachum, merciful. It's a name ascribed to the Creator himself, because despite being born absolutely opposite to him, we have great mercy. We have rachum from the merciful one, that we have had the implanted chip, so to speak, in our programming that allows us to build and arouse and activate the innermost godly, divine quality of giving. To continue, as we just finished off, as Baal Salam writes, all our movements are compelled to pivot around this self-regard. Why? What necessitates the creation within each person of selfish desire to receive? Baal Salam explains, God's will in general is to benefit his creations. And it's impossible that this goal be realized completely unless God's creations desire to receive pleasure and joy. As we see in the material desire to receive, excuse me, let's read that again. Baal Salam explains, quote, God's will in general is to benefit his creations. And it's impossible that this goal be realized unless God's creations desire to receive pleasure and joy. The fact that we have a will to receive is in order to fulfill the purpose of creation, as the Creator wants to give us infinite goodness. And our will to receive is specifically the mechanism to be able to receive that goodness. Our work is to eventually develop, slowly but surely, our desire to receive, to be more mature, being spiritual desires to receive. I want to receive the pleasure and light of the Creator. I want to receive a connection with the Creator. And once we hit the spitz, the tip, the apex of the will to receive, then we can talk about truly trying to step into the miraculous level, which we'll speak more about, of the desire to give in order to give. To continue, as we see in the material world, we cannot enjoy a meal if we do not have an appetite. In general, it's impossible to get pleasure without first having a desire to receive pleasure. So we see that God's desire to benefit his creations necessitates in practice that the desire to receive be the central feature of all things in creation. A newborn baby's desire for pleasure is undeveloped. So the baby enjoys only food and sleep. As the baby grows and begins to understand that one can get pleasure from other sources, the baby immediately wants to have them. The governing rule is, quote, the eye sees and the heart desires. Rashi's commentary on Numbers, or Bamidbar, 15:39. Quote, the eye sees. This does not only refer to the physical eye. Also, a person's intellect, their seichel in Hebrew, is called eye. Ayin, einayim. As we see in the verse that refers to the nation's wise people as, quote, the eyes of the congregation. The intellect, the logic of the congregation, so to speak, because they're the leaders of the community. That quote is from Bamidbar, or Numbers 15:24. So as the baby's intellect develops, the baby automatically desires the new pleasures that the intellect reveals. The pleasure received provides the motivational fuel to seek additional pleasure that will continue to feed this machine. As we're machines in essence, we're trying to activate our heart more so, to have a second heart, a real heart of feeling and loving and giving, as opposed to a stony heart that only cares about oneself. At a certain point, we make attempts to overcome desire and learn to think differently. Unfortunately, however, a majority of people fail to abandon the childhood stage until their death. What motivates most people until the day of death are jealousy, lust, and honor. Not that jealousy, lust, and honor necessarily equates to what we might call child consciousness, or the aspect of the child within our inner being, but relative to just receiving for oneself alone, if we're using child as a parameter of pure egoism, then yeah, it fits in. Jealousy, lust, and honor. As the sages say, jealousy, lust, and honor take a person out of this world. Because if someone is totally ensconced within those, never is able to rise above the prison of their egoism, the prison of their jealousies, lusts, and honor, then they're removed from the world because they have no place in the world. They can't develop themselves because they're just trapped in the prison. There's also the opposite notion, meaning if someone has a focused effort to correct themselves and rise above the prison of their egoism, then it's specifically by means of the jealousy, lusts, and honor that one becomes aware of. As we become aware of the egoism within and become aware of that which we need to repair and ask the Creator to assist us to repair, so then they become stepping stones to reach into higher desires, more refined and mature desires, being spiritual desires, desires for godliness and a connection with the Creator. Also, the sages say that there are holy versions of these in themselves. We can be jealous of the wise, and that can inspire us to learn more and observe their characteristics and be loving and giving just like them, as they are loving and giving, in order to be in similarity form with the Creator. When we have lusts, we can drag ourselves into the study halls, into the B'tei Midrash, and take that energy and desire and put it into a holy means to lust for the Torah and its knowledge and its wisdom and the refinement that it can provide us. Or in a holy setting between husband and wife, the lust can be used as a means to create light and life. Honor, as opposed to honoring oneself, we honor others. Most importantly, we give honor, respect, glory, and exalt the Creator. As the Baal Shem Tov says, there are no bad character traits, just character traits used badly. Everything has a holy spark. If we do succeed in refining the objects of our desires, the Rabbi Shlita continues, we can get to a relatively good situation which, although still based on self-love, does not involve coarse pleasures. For example, we may understand that we are able to receive pleasures and joy from the Torah. This stage of development can be divided into two levels. One, a lower level. We learn Torah and keep its mitzvot because we want to be paid with money or honor from the society. If so, then our goal is self-interest, having arrived at the conclusion that the best way to enjoy life is by means of the Torah and mitzvot. Number two, a higher level. We don't want people to pay us, feeling no need for what people can give. Rather, we want to receive payments from God, both in this world and in the next world. If so, then we are still being guided by our desire to receive pleasure and joy. We're still ensconced by the ego. This demonstrates how it's possible to be occupied with Torah and mitzvot, but still be completely cut off from connection with God. For God has no connection to self-love at all. And if we have a spark of egoism and intention for pleasing ourselves alone, then we're cut off from our connection with the Creator, because our connection is based on a similarity of form. And if our characteristic is opposite to His in any way, then that changes the frequency. You're now plugged into a different channel. There's no connection. Call back again later. This second level is actually unavoidable, at least temporarily. The love of the other and the love of God are wondrous levels that are not attained easily. This is not something laid out before us that anyone can just come and pick up. To develop a pure motivation requires a great deal of effort over an extended period of time. It does not happen overnight. You can't just trip on some type of psychedelic drug and experience ego death, or meditate in the mountains and have your soul pop out of your body in astral projection and imagine yourself to be corrected and righteous. Not so simple. It takes a very long and concentrated effort, of course, and can be expedited based on one's inner work and the effort they put in to go against their nature and go against their egoism and feel the resistance and still go against the fray to build themselves. Since self-love is the nature of human beings, the only way we can begin to approach the Torah and mitzvot is by way of self-love, which is called keeping the Torah not for its sake, or lo lishma. Therefore, our sages said in Masechet Pesachim 50b of the Talmud, quote, a person should keep Torah and the mitzvot not for its sake, lo lishma. For by means of lo lishma, not for its sake, the person will come to lishma, for its sake. A quick Kabbalah seed to plant, not going to get so deep into it. But l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, is the same numerical value as keter, chokhmah, and bina. As brought down in Kabbalah, there are vessels of giving and vessels of receiving in any particular system or partsuf, a body of a system that is, in essence, the 10 sfirot, as the 10 sfirot are included within every detail of reality in every system. When you learn Kabbalah, generally the guard, the Gimel Rishonim, the top 3 sfirot, Keter Chochmah Bina, in a general way, that there's many parameters, are the vessels of giving. And the lower 7 sfirot, the vessels of receiving, relatively speaking. Amazing. L'shem Shemaim, for the sake of heaven, for the sake of the Creator, is the same numerical value as the sum total of the spheros that equate to the vessels of giving, the pure, refined vessels that allow us to really give in order to give, a higher spiritual consciousness that we can merit to achieve. That's good for now regarding the sphero. The interpretation of the concept of not for its sake, continues the Rebbe Shlita, is on the basis of self-love. For there is no other place to start. But there comes a time when we need to leave the status of childhood. That is, to give up a life based on self-love. Self-love here is, of course, referring to the egoistic love of only serving oneself. In contrast to the healthy, developed, higher self-love of loving the aspect of giving within us, which is our essence. In essence, it's the difference between loving the soul, the neshama within, more specifically the nefesh elokis, the divine soul, in contrast to nefesh bahamis, the beastly soul. And a simple parameter, one is the desire to give, and the other is the desire to receive. In truth, it's all the desire to receive, but the divine soul has the capacity to receive altruistically, receive in order to give. As our soul is the means, and that which has been deposited in us, to allow us to rise in our consciousness, as they're intimately related and connected, to come to the purpose of creation and receive the infinite abundance that the Creator wishes to bestow upon us, right here, right now, and receive that abundance for His sake. Again, but there comes a time when we need to leave the status of childhood, that is to give up a life based on self-love, a life based on egoism, and move to the status of maturity. At maturity, we realize that true observance of Torah and mitzvot never permits us to be content with egocentric motivation. Maturity in adulthood, in this parameter, is referring to at least the acknowledgement that egoism is poisonous and altruism is the goal. I would say that there are positive aspects of childhood that we can employ and arouse even as adults, if we've merited to become some. The innocent curiosity and seeking of information, of wanting to know, I think that's a positive aspect of a child. The playfulness and simplicity and purity, despite the natural egoism of a child, but the purity of intention and silliness and playfulness, that's also a positive thing. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov has plenty of literature speaking about the value of playfulness and silliness and being in happiness in a most simple way. But the truth is, it's not simple being simple. But that's a side point. In regards to our inner work, the child is that part within us that does not prioritize what's important. You can have the greatest Torah scholar of the generation providing beautiful Torah, giving class on Shabbat, and instead of being in the class, sitting and listening intently, a child could care less. Child is outside, eating candy, playing with toys, kicking a soccer ball. Objectively, in terms of what's going to bring a person closer to the Creator and doing a mitzvah, let alone a huge one like learning Torah, let alone from a spiritual master, no comparison. But the child within us chooses again and again to involve ourselves in that which is not as valuable and not as important in regards to our inner work. The Rebbe Shita continues, there are those who deceive themselves by relying on the principle, quote, a person should keep Torah and the mitzvot not for its sake, for by means of, for not for its sake, lo lishma, the person will come to for its sake, lishma, as brought down in Mesechet Sanhedrin of the Talmud, 105b. They think that if the sages said that from lo lishma, not for its sake, we will come to lishma, for its sake, then surely they knew what they were talking about. And so we can just wait until lishma, for its sake. We can wait for it to come along automatically. Just keep learning and doing mitzvot. You'll become righteous eventually. It'll just happen. Just do it. Just keep going. The correct response to this is no. Without making an effort, it's impossible to arrive at keeping the Torah and the mitzvot for the sake of heaven. Not for its sake does not develop into for its sake just by existing long enough. There's no magic threshold that just passes and happens. That way we will forever remain mired in self-love and egoistic love. Perhaps we will move from receiving pleasure from chocolate and candy to enjoying Torah and the mitzvot, or to enjoying the thought that we will receive benefit in the next world. But still, everything remains centered on egoism. So we end up, as we began, stuck with self-love. And the main supplier is the Torah and the mitzvot. We cannot connect in this way to God's existence, even via the Torah given to us by God. But why doesn't God automatically, without our effort, grant us the character of loving the other? The answer is that our effort is needed in order to create the desire to love the other. In order for God to fulfill our desire to love the other, we have to have the desire. In general, in order for there to be a feeling of a lack, there must first be a lack to fill. One cannot get an answer if there was no question. We cannot feel comfort if we've never felt a distress. A person cannot become someone who gives selflessly if he or she has never suffered from being someone who receives selfishly. A person cannot have faith if he or she never suffered from being a disbeliever. It takes a lot of effort to sense a lack, that is, to be afflicted by failing to love the other, to be afflicted by failing to get free from the prison of self-love. In addition to our effort, it also requires intervention from God. A sense of lack of this sort is indeed a rarely seen miracle in this world. Something completely contrary to our self-centered nature. So if any of us are listening and can acknowledge and see that we have a lack, whether it's a lack of emunah, lack of connection to the Creator, so on and so forth, but those of course being the main things to focus on, it's a miracle. It's a miracle relative to the majority of the world and the mode of consciousness that they're abiding by. Because it's the truth. We are in lack. We're lacking connection. So it's possible to say, as we'll learn in a moment, there's a lack of a lack. along with all the contrast painted here. You can't give selflessly unless you felt the pain of selfishness. You can't have faith unless you're a disbeliever. So too, there is no peace without war. And that is why the numerical value, the gematria of Esau, twin evil brother of Yaakov Avinu, is the same gematria as Shalom, peace. Esau, as well as many characters throughout Tanakh, is representing an inner aspect of our consciousness. Most simply, the will to receive for itself alone, our egoism. So this poster boy of egoism is equivalent to peace. Peace is the highest level. To be in peace is to be shalem. It's related to perfection. Because there is no peace without war. The war against the Esav within. The war against the nations within us, being the aspects of our consciousness that keep us disconnected from the Creator because we're only focusing on ourselves alone. By means of the war and crying out to the Creator to assist us in winning the battle, day in, day out, sometimes dozens, if not hundreds of times in a day, eventually we'll come to Shalom. The Rebbe Shlita continues. In this context, we can understand the verse, quote, command the children of Aharon, from Vayikra or Leviticus 6:2. The commentator Rashi explains that command here connotes to urge. And in particular, it is necessary to urge people to do something when there is chisaron kis. The literal translation of chisaron kis is lack of pocket. But it is usually understood to mean a lack of money in one's pocket. That is, it will cost a lot. However, Balasulam interpreted it being a lack of pocket as a lack of receptacle, a lack of a vessel. Since a receptacle itself represents a lack that needs to be filled, Rashi's interpretation, according to Balasulam, is that we need to be urged to create a lack when there is a lack of a lack. That is, the least we can be expected to do is to be pained by the fact that we don't feel pained by our failing to love the other. This is the first step toward the final redemption. In a similar fashion, the consciousness that we should connect to on Tisha B'Av, when we mourn the destruction of the temple, as the Zohar teaches us, the inner temple is the main temple. And through the building of the holy temple within, eventually after reaching, understandably so, a certain percentage of refined individuals existing in a higher state of spiritual consciousness within the Jewish people, then will manifest the physical holy temple. But first and foremost, it starts within. As above, so below, because everything in our physical reality is a physical branch of spiritual roots. And the spiritual reality is within each and every one of us, within our consciousness. So we're not mourning a physical temple, though we can, but more importantly, more practically, we should be mourning, says the Baal Sulam and the Rebbe Zitzal and the Rebbe Shlita, following in their ways, is we're mourning our soul. More specifically, we're mourning the lack of mourning for our soul. We're mourning the lack of a lack. Meaning we don't even care about the soul to begin with. We don't even care about the inner work of connecting to the Creator. And I don't even care that I don't care. That's what I'm mourning for. So to here we see that we need a lack. So we need to pray to have a lack. We need to ask the Creator to give us a good lack, because we have a lack of a lack. Because only by means of a lack, by means of a vessel, which is the lack, can we receive the light. So if we're going through the motions in our Judaism, learning, praying 3 times a day, keeping Shabbos, eating kashrus, those who are experiencing difficulty, strange thoughts and desires, and are going through the ups and downs, the peaks and troughs of inner work, that's the sign that they're on the train, that they're heading to the goal. If everything's peaceful, quiet, and nice, someone should be very worried. There's no peace without war. However, the Rebbe Shita continues. However, the fact that we fulfill God's mitzvot and learn Torah to the extent that we are able will not in itself be sufficient to bring the final perfection of the world. Even if this involves thousands of people from a variety of different approaches to Judaism, all of them may still be living within a framework of lies and deceit. It's a bitter point, but until we reach emet, until we reach the spiritual state of consciousness, which is truth. What is truth? The desire to give in order to give. Altruism. Until the Creator provides us the miracle of arising us into a second nature. So then by definition, we're still ensconced by our egoism, and therefore living a life of falsehood. Living a life of lies and deceit. And we're attempting, fleetingly, moment to moment, to connect to truth. Hopefully, more and more. B'ezrat Hashem, with God's help. Those that keep mitzvot look at those who don't and say to themselves, thank God that we have merited to keep mitzvot. If all of the world would like us, the Messiah would have already arrived. But the truth is not as they think. So long as people are content to keep Torah and mitzvot on the basis of self-love, they are nourishing their egoism. And this is not what God wants from us. We have the choice to continue our undemanding lifestyle or to understand that our situation is not satisfactory. We need to understand that what's wrong is not how others behave, but the problem is within ourselves. We cannot hang the blame on societal failures or the failures of other people, non-believers or any other group. The blame lies solely with those who continue to develop their self-love, continue to develop their egoism, including those who do it under the mantle of the Torah. That's putting it lightly. Even more so, I would say, those who are keeping the Torah. They have more responsibility. They have more mechanisms. They're connecting to more channels to bring abundance and to reveal the light of the Creator into the world and to bring goodness, to refine themselves and the world at large by means of refining themselves. And if they reach a corrected state, then they can help refine others as well. So in contrast to that, by living an undemanding life and just sitting back and hoping that your merits outweigh your demerits, by the time you get upstairs, when your soul leaves your body, hopefully you'll have a good accounting. Not enough and completely not the way. Totally disconnected from the truth of the Jewish tradition. There is more to learn in this essay. I think it's a good place to stop for now. It's a longer essay. Tov. Great essay, Baruch Hashem. Really enjoyable to learn with you guys. Till next time. All the best.